Welcome to our World Cup special from Square Raindrop. I don't know anything about football, do you?
Bits, but I know more about weather.
Exactly, particularly in Doha, because you spent a long time there.
Nearly 13 years, Jo. I spent way too long in the desert. I think I'm now officially a camel.
Really so. Are you going to be one of the camels that's going to afflict the England squad, because they're staying somewhere about 12 miles away from Doha, aren't they? And there's a pair of camels fenced off on the beach there, and apparently they make quite a lot of noise.
I think they're near Al Wakra, which is a town just outside Doha. My friend used to have a band called Big in Al Wakra. So cheesy. Anyway, I digress. So yes, they are on the beach, near the beach, with some camels. But really, you have AC blasting the whole time. There's this constant chug, chug, whirring noise. So I don't think they're really going to notice the camels.
No, just one of those things that's just sitting outside the window. I have to confess, I've never been to Doha, never been to that part of the world at all.
Despite all those invitations I gave you, I cannot believe you never took one up.
Do you know? I don't remember those, but I'll take your word for it. So what is it like living out there in that kind of heat?
It's not always hot. Like, people have this perception that Doha is always incredibly hot. And yes, of course it is in summer. But in the winter, it isn't. And there's usually a good few weeks in January where people are complaining that it's cold. Now, okay, cold is relative. And usually the top temperature is around 16 degrees, but it's only 16 degrees for like 1 second. And then it starts to get cooler again. And all the houses are designed to release heat. So they've all got tiled floors and marble stairs and windows that don't fit terribly well. So all the air just kind of disappears, and it is cold. Like, in the evenings, you'd be sitting there under your little TV blanket, dragging the cat back onto your lap, saying, "No, you're not going anywhere."
You say that it's cold, and yet it's a hot country. Of course, the reason why I didn't come to see you in Doha was because at the time I was living in Portugal, and you do have the same thing there, not the same intense heat, but the same kind of building construct. Most of them, it's kind of concrete, and the floors are concrete, and of course they all have to be to earthquake standard as well. And so the one thing that I always said to people coming out to Portugal, and you didn't come, is to bring something warm for your feet, because even in spring and autumn, you know, your feet on those cold floors, it is pretty bitter. I've never been more cold than I was in Portugal in winter.
Well, the coldest it's ever got down to in Qatar is 1.5 degrees.
Oh, really? Not
That's
even
pretty
freezing?
cold.
Yes, it is. Yes, it
I mean,
is.
cold enough to snow. Obviously, the air would be so dry by the time it got to 1.5 that there'd be no way it could snow. But you could theoretically get snow at that temperature.
Okay. And do their summers and winters work the same as ours?
Same time of year, yeah. They're in the northern hemisphere, so this is autumn coming into winter, and summer is at the same time as our summer. But the summer's sort of split into two, really, in Doha, because you get the heat that's a dry heat, and that builds throughout the year, and then suddenly the humidity kicks in. The winds sort of swing round and bring in some humidity. So one day you'll be saying, "Wow, it is hot, and the next day it is just insufferable because the humidity has closed in and it's really hard. I mean, you sweat just so long as you stand outside. Your sunglasses steam up when you leave buildings. I mean, it's fairly unpleasant for those couple of months. The worst is usually mid-July to mid-September.
So those people who don't understand humidity, you can actually show them this empirically by having the same temperature one day and then the next day, same temperature, but with a high humidity. And suddenly you realize how uncomfortable it is.
Yeah, that's right. Usually the temperature on the thermometer actually drops when the humidity kicks in, because it's harder to heat air that's humid, because you've got to heat the air and the water in the air as well. So the actual temperature on the thermometer drops a little bit, but it feels far worse.
So what are the footballers going to experience at this time of year? It's November.
November was my favorite time of year, November and March, because it's not the coolest it's going to be, but it's not hot. And in November, everybody started coming out from inside where they've been hiding during the horrible summer months. And they start coming out. It's kind of like our spring. So the plants start to grow again. People start to come out and enjoy the weather. So it was my favorite time of year. Loved November. And the average temperature is usually around 29.5, which is beautiful. But it's been a bit hot there recently, Jo.
Oh,
It's
has
been
it?
around 34 over the
Oh,
last few days.
okay, that's not pleasant. That's not the kind of temperature that you want to play football in.
No, and humid as well.
Oh
So
dear.
it's not nice for being outside doing active sports in the middle of the day. No. So what happens at this time of year quite often is you get a northwesterly wind. That's the prevailing wind, and it brings very dry air in. And that's kicking up now and will be with us over the next few days. So we'll see the temperatures gradually drop off back to average for this time of year. But the trade-off is that northwesterly wind called the shamal often brings in quite a lot of dust. It picks up a load of dust particles from north of us, usually over Iraq and Iran, and brings them down the Gulf towards us. And then you can get your dust storms, and those are pretty horrible.
Okay, describe a dust storm to us.
Well, there are two major kind of dust storm types. There's one that just kind of like floats in when you're not looking and just kind of appears. And the other one, which is like a wall of dust. Those ones are called haboob, and you can see them coming. So you get this wall of dust coming towards you, and you go from blue sky, absolutely fine, to suddenly you're in the dust storm, and it's really windy, your face is exfoliated to within an inch of its life, the temperature drops, and it's a lot cooler. So yeah, it's very different 1 minute to the next. So that's a haboob. But the ones that kind of come surreptitiously overnight, the first thing you know about them is when you wake up in the morning and you go, what's that strange taste? What is that in the air? And then you realize when you open the curtains, oh yeah, everything's yellow. We've got a dust storm.
Can't be very good for you to be breathing that in.
No, it really isn't. When there's a dust storm, the hospitals do notice that there's an influx in patients with respiratory problems.
So we've got all these footballers going out there to play in the World Cup. I think the kickoffs are staggered during the day, but I think some of them kick off at about 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and then a few of the games at 10 p.m. If I had a choice, I think I'd be going for the 10 p.m. one. Although, to be fair, I wouldn't be playing anyway. Not my thing. But I'd be going when it was coolest. What if they encounter a dust storm? What if there is one? Would they stop the game? Would they stop the match for that?
I really don't know. I don't know the rules around dust storms and football, but it wouldn't be pleasant to play in some of the worst dust storms that I've seen. It would be quite dangerous, I would think.
Do you think many of the managers, the teams, have actually considered the health risks of being out there, the heat, the humidity, the potential dust storms?
I think they have to have done. Usually players and teams, they spend years, really analysing the weather and the other teams and everything. There's usually someone on it.
When you first went out to Doha to do the weather for Al Jazeera?
Yes, Al Jazeera.
Did you know much about the weather in that part of the world, or was it something that you learnt when you got there?
When I first arrived, I had to look on a map to find out where we are. So I think that probably answers your question. It's just everything was different, and it's grown so quickly. So I was over there for 13 years, and I came back about 3 years ago. So it's probably changed enormously in those 3 years, especially as it's been building up to this massive tournament. And in those 12, 13 years that I was there, it changed hugely as well. So suddenly loads more buildings sprung up in West Bay. So West Bay now looks like Manhattan. Like it's that sparkly tower kind of thing going on. And the winds whip down, because we have the prevailing northwesterly winds, and they whip down through those streets, funneled through them. So it's fairly ferocious, that wind, on a normal day, let alone when there's a dust storm. But when I was driving home, it was quite, I remember when I first arrived in Doha, I was driving home and I had this feeling that somebody was looking at me, that kind of, oh. So I looked up, and I was in a little low down car, and the car next to me was a Land Cruiser, and the person looking at me was actually not a person, but a cheetah in the passenger seat of someone's car.
In the passenger seat. You're joking. Oh,
I rolled up my window and carried on going. I'm not stopping.
Wow. How can you be allowed to do that? I mean, do you know something? The police here, they can't stop the oil and gas protesters. I don't think they'd stop somebody with a cheetah in their car.
Yeah, I don't know how the rules worked over there. I mean, obviously cheetahs you're not supposed to have them as pets, but I guess there was a blind eye that used to be turned, maybe. I saw a monkey on a wing mirror of a car once outside your rear bookstore. All goes on.
Is it going to be a big culture shock for the players then, if they've not been there before?
In some ways, I do remember, because we navigate round our streets by, oh, that big tree over there, or that particular looking house. But when I first arrived, I was like, it all looks the same. All the houses are the same colour. They're designed to reflect the heat, so they're all a kind of sand colour, and all the compounds kind of look the same. And I remember thinking, I'm never going to find my way around. But then you begin to get used to it, and you look for differences. So you're looking for different things. So it's a bit different when you first arrive. But I guess, like everything, after 13 years, it becomes second nature.
So for the next few days then, we're watching out for a potential dust storm. We think that there could be a slight drop in temperature, but that's going to be compensated by the humidity or the wind.
No. So there will be a slight drop in temperature that may bring a dust storm. Fingers crossed it won't, but if it does, that will make things rather nasty for playing. You don't want to be breathing in that dust.
Well, I'll tell you what, shall Dee and me watch the weather? Because I won't be watching the football.
Oh, I'll be watching the football. I'll be cheering on. My little kiddies don't know whether to support England or Argentina, because my other half's from Argentina.
Ah, good point. So many countries in so little time. As always, if you want to ask us questions, watch the weather, see what's happening in Doha. It is at SQ Raindrop. It's Steffi and Jo talking about the weather together.